The moment that you start speaking about men's issues or you claim a positive identity for yourself as a man, you are inevitably going to be accused of being hateful. You're going to be told that you hate women. I've been told that many times. People say, "Oh, you're so bitter on your channel." Let me clarify what I am and what I suspect you are so that you can meaningfully articulate the difference, because you're not hateful, or at least I'm not. I am angry, and I'm not ashamed of my anger. I'm tired of men's anger being ashamed. I'm proud of it. It reflects my courage. It reflects my values. And so if somebody says, like, "Why are you so angry?" My response now is, why are you not? Are you listening to the points that I'm expressing, the injustices that I'm pointing out? If this does not make you angry, what does that say about you? Now, in order for you to meaningfully articulate the difference between anger and hatred, you need to understand the specific nuances of why they're different. Because while anger can turn into hatred at some point, it does not have to do so. Anger is an extremely powerful tool for corrective justice, for diagnosis, for protection. And I'm going to go into all of that in this video and explain that in detail so that you understand it. But first, let me just be absolutely clear that it is not a coincidence or a mistake that the opposition of men's rights, toxic modern women, feminism, they don't want to acknowledge the men's rights movement as an angry movement. They want to paint it as a hate movement, because hate is much easier to dismiss. If you paint something as hateful, you don't need to engage with its arguments. You don't need to be accountable for your role in creating that anger. Hate is just a moral designation that you can give to a group or to a perspective that allows you the privilege of not having to engage with those arguments. You just dismiss it. Oh, no, that's just hate. Those are just terrible people. They're hateful, which is why it's important to reclaim anger as the correct emotion that you're experiencing and expressing when you're talking about these issues, so that you are not dismissed. So let's talk about what is the difference between anger and hatred. Anger arises when you sense an injustice, when something about your values comes into conflict with reality or society or your relationships, and it happens despite attempts to correct it. So initially there may be confusion or goodwill efforts to just make a change, to fix something, but if repeatedly you are blocked or ridiculed while making those attempts to fix, eventually anger is the emotion that will take place. And it can ultimately become hatred, but that's only if it is left to fester for too long and doesn't see any positive outcome possible. Eventually, it will fizzle into a let's just destroy everything, let's just burn the whole thing down kind of hatred. There's no positive outcome that's even being sought. But that's not the case for anger. Anger is, at its root, an expression for something positive. Anger doesn't want negative things to occur. It is an expression of frustration that the positive outcome has not yet been achieved. And so it's a temporary shot of energy and power and adrenaline to try and fix something. It's an expression of justice. I'm angry and that gets me to take action. And one of the reasons why that's so frightening for the powers that be, why they don't want to acknowledge these perspectives as angry perspectives, is because anger demands accountability. When you are angry, you say to the system, you say to the people who are propping it up, why are you doing this? Why are you allowing this? How can you continue to justify the suffering that you are inflicting? Please be accountable for your behavior. But if you don't want to be accountable, of course, you don't want to acknowledge that this is anger. Much easier to paint it off as hatred. Quickly, let me just ask you if you've ever known somebody who's had their identity stolen. Nobody thinks that it's going to happen to them, but then once it does, you think, why didn't I prepare for this? Why didn't I protect myself? That's certainly what I thought when my channel got hacked. I lost access to my Google account. It was terrifying. But that's why I'm grateful for the ongoing support of the sponsor of today's video, Aura, because these guys serve as the frontline defense against scammers, stalkers, and data brokers. Those guys who make massive profits compiling a profile of your personal information and then selling it without your consent. Aura automatically removes your personal information off those sites and then works to keep them off. And when you compare Aura to the competition, nobody else offers this many features for this price. You're not just getting data removed, you're getting a VPN, antivirus, password manager, and dark web alerts. And if anything does go wrong, they have 24/7 US-based support, and it comes with $5 million in identity theft insurance. It's incredible value. So check out my link at aura.com/AlexanderGrace to try it for free for 14 days. That's enough time for Aura to identify how much of your personal information is out there being sold. There's a link in the description box below. Now, let's return to the video. This anger is actually not the liability that so many men have been told that it is. A lot of men are quick to deny their anger. They're ashamed of it. They want to hide it. And they say, no, I'm not angry. I'm not angry. Do not fall for it, okay? Claim your anger. It is a source of strength, and it's very, very powerful. It serves a very important role, primarily as a fuel for action. You know, if you need the actual energy to get out there to try and make those changes, to express your point of view, anger is extremely useful. But beyond that, it's also just a very powerful tool for diagnosis, because as a man, sometimes when engaging with women and this feminized society, it can be very confusing to understand what's going on, because femininity operates under a different set of values in a different paradigm, and you're not always clear exactly what's going on. Cognitively, it can be very difficult to actually figure out what's happening, and hopefully channels like this can be a useful tool for you to understand what exactly is occurring as I break these things down in a way that's, digestible for the male mind. But even if you don't have a cognitive understanding of what's occurring, often anger will arise before you can even think about this stuff. You can just sense inside your body when you see the way that you're being treated or the way that men are talked about in society. That sense of injustice, this isn't fair, that anger arises, that's a diagnostic tool. Your emotions are telling you something is not right here. We don't necessarily know what it is. I can't give you the thought process yet, but investigate this. Type something into YouTube. Be curious, talk to people about it. You've got to learn to trust that emotion to a certain degree. And then it can also serve as a protective mechanism. So once you're aware that there are ways that you are being taken advantage of, you're being shamed or criticized or blamed in a way that's not just, anger can be a very powerful shield against you adopting that. When all of society wants to push all of this negativity and fault onto you, how are you going to stop that from just seeping in and messing with your mind, messing with your identity? The modern generations of men, they're so broken, they're so defeated, they're so low in testosterone, but it's because they have absorbed like a sponge all of this negativity. How are you going to prevent that? Well, anger is a protective mechanism. When you say, hey, that's not okay, don't speak to me that way, don't talk about me like that, don't treat me in this manner. I would like some respect. I would like some kindness. I would like the same dignity that I afford you to be returned to me. There's an edge to my voice. There's an edge to that perspective, but it's not hateful. It's not blaming. It's a powerful self-assertion of your right to be treated nicely in society, to be treated with some respect. That's a protective anger. That's very, very important. And without that, if you don't have any anger that you can summon, like if you just like, oh, no, I don't ever want to be angry. That reminds me of someone I grew up, or that women have told me that male anger is just the worst thing ever. Let me tell you, if you don't have anger as part of your arsenal, depression is what's waiting for you, okay? When you don't have any means of internally fighting back against all of this negativity, you're going to feel overwhelmed. You're going to feel hopeless. It's going to weigh you down, this crushing weight of shame that's been put on you. And you're going to feel like you can't do anything, just this hopeless mess of a situation that you have no control over. How do you gain back that control? Well, in the long term, there's a number of systems that we can talk about to get into that place. But in the short term, you're going to need a burst of anger to just be like, no, this is wrong. This is messed up. I should not be being crushed like this. Fuck that. I'm angry and I push it off. That anger is really, really important. And so let's talk now about why men are angry. I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody who's been watching my videos for a long time, because it's what we talk about and it's what you've observed in your own life. But essentially, men are not succeeding at having a happy life. Men are not succeeding in living up to their potential and expressing their masculinity in a way that feels meaningful to them and is generating praise and appreciation from the people around them. And for so long, both sides of politics have kind of dismissed that lack of success for different reasons. And there has not really been any kind of ally, because from the sort of progressive perspective, there's just been this endless, tirade against men and misogyny and toxic patriarchy. And when men are failing, they've been kind of like laughing and like, yeah, serves you right. You think that this is easy for women. Now it's finally your turn to not do well. But then from the more like conservative side, the focus has been so strongly on, well, you're an individual. You can make it if you try hard enough. And, you just got to man up and be strong and be a man and support everybody else. But, don't talk about your feelings. Don't, examine any of the deeper societal, structures that might be working against you. You just got to plow through, because that's what being a man is. And I don't intend to make this video political, but can you see how woefully inadequate both of those perspectives are? They're not addressing the real issue, which is that men have been lied to. That's the problem. We've not been told the truth. The map that we have been given does not match reality. We've been told that we're privileged. We're not. We've been told that women are all sweet and kindness. They're not. We've not been educated about the dark side of female psychology. We've not been told that the system that we're working in fundamentally does not treat men as having equal rights to women. In fact, we've been told the opposite, that we're incredibly privileged, that we're the leaders of society. And so a lot of men, in trying to navigate these mixed messages and doing their best to sincerely be the man that they're supposedly being told to be from all these different societal perspectives, they find that they're failing. Now, that's not a lack of map reading ability. If it was, you'd find a few random instances of men ending up in failure while the majority of men are succeeding. We have entire generations of men who have failed, who are not succeeding. Young guys who do not speak to women, who've never been in a relationship. Older guys who can't see their children. They're getting divorced and they're getting brutalized in a family court system after doing everything right. So many guys in the exact same situation. Now, is that a coincidence? Is that an individual moral failure that's just happened hundreds of millions of times? That pattern's repeated? Or has every single man been given the wrong map and we're all ending up in the wrong destination? And so people ask, like, well, why are men so angry? How could they not be? They've been robbed of the life that they should have lived. They should have a life where they do the right thing and they get rewarded for it, where they go to school, they go to college, and they're treated with dignity as logical thinking beings. They get a great job, they attract a wonderful wife, they have wonderful kids, they're appreciated as a husband and a father, and they're generally included as a moral equal in society, and they've got that respect. This is a reasonable expectation, and we are so far from that. The entitlement that men are told that they have, the privilege, the shame, the blame, all of it on young guys who were never around during the supposed time that the patriarchy had women as slaves. We're talking about generations removed, and yet this original stain of guilt is placed onto men. Later on, in the Patreon version, I'm going to go into a deep dive on whether or not women, modern women and feminism is an expression of anger or hatred. I think you're going to like that part. But right now, let's just stick with the fact that, of course, men are angry, and that this is not a moral failure of individual men. It's not a problem. There's nothing defective about men feeling angry. This is a natural, predictable emotion that any rational person would feel in the result of this system of being where they are. But that's frightening to people. That's frightening to women and the powers that be, because this kind of anger demands justice. It demands that we fix the system. It demands that we level the playing field and make things genuinely equal again. Because anger asks questions. Anger wants to fix things. And if you are currently benefiting from the privileged position that you have in society, where you've got special status as a woman, as a victim, and men are copying the blame for absolutely everything, you don't want the system to correct itself. You know, you're benefiting from that. You like being in this two-tiered moral system where men are shamed and women are glorified. And so this kind of anger that you're seeing from men, this demand for justice, you're going to do everything you can to make sure that that voice is never heard. That's why you're going to paint it as though it's hate. Not because men's anger is actually making you unsafe. No, it's because men's anger is making you accountable. And that's what you're ultimately scared of. You can dismiss hatred, quite easily, but you can't dismiss the questions that anger asks. And that's what genuinely frightens these people. And so in the men's spaces, you've often heard people talk about like an anger phase. I'm going through an anger phase. And what am I? I'm year 8, I think, into doing this channel. And I don't know. It doesn't feel like a phase to me. I feel angry. And I'm not interested in somebody convincing me that my anger is just a phase that I need to grow out of. It's kind of embarrassing that you're still angry. You just sort of got to get over it. I think I'm going to be angry so long as the injustice continues to exist. But I like that. It brings clarity to my mind. It helps energize me to keep working on this, to keep fighting for justice and for the rights of men. I like the anger because it helps me self-assert my own boundaries and my own dignities. It's very useful. I know that anger is not the destination, but justice is, and anger is kind of an important vehicle to get there. It's not something I live in all of the time, and it's not something that's particularly pleasant to have provoked. I don't really like feeling angry, but I do like knowing that when I see something that is not right, that anger is not something I'm going to suppress. It's going to express itself through me, and that's a good thing. I can trust in that. I really, really like that, because suppressed anger is dangerous. This is another aspect to it, is that if you're listening to this, you're like, look, I can kind of see where you're coming from, but I just don't like anger. I'm just going to keep on pushing it down. Do you see what happens when you do that? Is that it's going to go one of two ways. If you don't acknowledge your anger, which is a positive, corrective emotion, you're going to channel it into a destructive emotion. And that's either going to be depression or it is going to be hatred. Because if you don't allow yourself to feel anger, then a sense of hopelessness is going to come over you. And if you direct that inwards, just like, what's the point? I can't figure this out. I can't be angry. I'm not good enough to make any of those perspectives. I can't be righteous. I can't assert my values or my sense of what's just. That's just not my place. That's going to lead to depression. It's going to lead to you just feeling that weight so strong, and you'll lose even the care to get up, to keep trying. In that instance, anger is absolutely necessary to push you out of it. And dare I say, the same is true if you're hateful. And I'm not going to deny that in men's spaces, you absolutely will find some hateful individuals who are not interested in fixing the system. They're not interested in enlisting women as allies or working towards a better future. They just want the whole thing to burn. They just want other people to suffer the way that they've suffered. It's kind of like the last resort of feeling power is to not try and improve things, but just to make everybody else hurt as much as you're hurting. And you want to dismiss nuance. You want to push people down and keep on breaking things into further and further pieces of discrimination until you're left with a kind of a binary of like me versus everybody else. And I just hate absolutely everything. It's in a sense just a different expression of depression, but this time it's projected outwards. But again, anger can be a really powerful way of moving out of that. Sadness also can be grief, but that's a subject for another video. But right now, we're talking about anger because it is an energizing, adrenaline fueling emotion. And so I want to finish the video by just saying, I'm not going to shame you for feeling angry. You're not going to find that on this channel, and an open acknowledgement that I am angry. I have anger as an emotion, and you'll see me get angry in my videos, but it's not something that I'm ashamed of. I'm openly admitting it. You can't point to me as like, aha, see, he's angry. Yes, I'm angry. Now, we've established that. Would you like to talk about why I'm angry? What's making me angry? Can we please have that discussion? That's what I'd really like, because I think that this anger is good. If the stuff that I talk about on my videos, in my content, makes you angry, I think that's a positive thing. I think that that means that your desire for justice is still intact and that you're still trying to improve things. And that's positive. But I'll also say that it's not my explicit intention to make you angry. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not just trying to provoke this emotion for no reason. I'm not upset if that's the byproduct. What I'm trying to do is tell you the truth about how things work, about how society operates, about how psychology differs between men and women, and how to navigate that. And when you see how things could be versus how things are, if you feel angry, that's okay. It's not my goal, but I think that anger can serve an extremely useful purpose of helping you clarify what's actually going on. And speaking of that, let's talk about what's going on with modern women, because you've heard the distinction between anger and hatred. Anger wants to fix things, it wants positive outcome. Hatred just wants to burn and blame and destroy. And ask yourself, well, which one of those emotions better reflects the ideology of feminism and its modern adherents? That's what we're going to talk about in the Patreon version of this video. So if you want to keep watching, head on over to Patreon.